Hey everyone, I just want to take a minute to remind you that you're in my thoughts and prayers. I know we can't be together, but interestingly enough, I've heard some people say that in the last couple of weeks, they've spent more time communicating with friends and family than they have in the last year. Today I'd like to offer some thoughts that I hope will encourage you. In John chapter 16, Jesus seems to be giving his disciples some rather disconcerting news. How's this? The time is coming when anyone who kills you will think they are offering a service to God. But now I am going to him who sent me. I have much more to say to you, more than you can now bear. Jesus went on to say, in a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me. And what was the disciples' response to all this? They said, we don't understand what he's saying. Jesus went on to say, very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. A time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered, each to your own home. Sound familiar? But the chapter ends with Jesus saying, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. There's an interesting belief that once people become Christians, their lives are exempt from trouble. That grief and anxiousness will never touch them again. Wow, what a misconception. You and I will experience trouble. We're experiencing it now. Listening to the news is like hearing those words of Jesus when he warned his disciples of this pending tribulation. We turn on the news and we hear about the exponential spread of COVID-19 and about those who've lost their lives because of this virus. Some of us are anxious for our friends and loved ones, those who are elderly or have compromised immune systems. Some of us are anxious about our jobs and finances. There's a lot of negativity that can captivate our minds. Decades ago, when Gina and I were getting married, finances were of course a concern. I was a musician, and that can be a haphazard way to make a living. I wanted to provide for my wife, and didn't know if music could be the avenue in which to do it. I had a conversation with a young lady who was a wonderful Christian, but had a debilitating disease. She had crippling arthritis, and in the months leading up to her wedding, she had a conversation with her fiancé in which they both acknowledged that unless God performed a miracle, she would be wheelchair bound in a few years. This woman then had a conversation with me about my pending marriage. And while others expressed their concerns about me supporting a wife and family through music, she said, John, now is the time you'll be able to see God perform his miracles. Wow, what an interesting perspective. While many were concerned about whether or not we could make it, this young lady encouraged me to look upon my future with anticipation. Well, I think that same thing applies to all of us right now. Varied opinions swirl around us, some optimistic, some pessimistic. Some are using their faith in Christ as justification for social disobedience. Others are using their faith to reach out and help those less fortunate. Some Christians are having a difficult time grabbing hold of their faith because they're overwhelmed by what they hear on the news. And some Christians feel their faith is welling up within them, and they're completely undaunted by what they may hear. So, what are we to do? How are we to think? In Matthew 10:16, Jesus encourages us to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. And though most of us can appreciate being compared to a dove, many of us might be a bit put off by being compared to a snake. Well, rest assured, Jesus was not alluding to the snake in the Garden of Eden. He was talking about the shrewdness of a snake, the traits that keep it from being ensnared in a trap. You could interpret this as the wisdom of a snake and the harmlessness of a dove. 19th century pastor Charles Simeon says this about the serpent and dove imagery. Now the wisdom of the one and the harmlessness of the other are very desirable to be combined in the Christian character, because it is by such a union that the Christian will be enabled to cope successfully with more powerful enemies. Folks, as we try to negotiate our way through a pandemic and all the issues attached to it, we must be wise and we must be gentle. When we define the snake as shrewd, I don't mean dishonest. Dishonesty is not an option. And when I use the word gentle to describe a dove, I don't mean gullible. As our example, Jesus was shrewd, being well aware of each of his audiences and speaking to them in a way most appropriate to their understanding. His gentleness was evident to all. His compassion for children, his weeping over his dead friend, his trip to the cross. But rest assured, Jesus was not afraid to exhibit righteous anger. Think about when Jesus took a whip, overturned tables, and kicked the money changers out of the temple. Jesus was as wise as a serpent and gentle as a dove. He knew and understood those around him, and though driven by compassion and grace, he wasn't afraid to speak honestly to the hypocrisy he saw in the religious leaders of his day. As you and I walk through this pandemic, we must minister to those who are finding hope difficult to come by. We must pray for those who are ill, and we must continually put our faith in God. We must also speak the truth in love and grace, but speak the truth nonetheless. God has Bethel Church here for such a time as this. I pray that God grants each of us the wisdom and gentleness we need. I also pray that he will grant us opportunity to be lights in the dark and salt in a culture that has lost its flavor. Right now, church is different, yet it's very much the same. A few days ago, my wife had an old school song rolling around in her head. I'd like to give you some of the lyrics because they seem appropriate. Let the church be the church. Let the people rejoice. For we've settled the question and we've made our choice. Let the anthems ring out, songs of victory swell. For the church triumphant is alive and well. You know, this ship's been through battles before. The storms and the tempests and the rocks on the shore. And though the hull may be battered, inside it's safe and dry. It's going to carry its cargo to the port in the sky. Let's end this where we started, John 15. In verse 33, Jesus said, I have told you these things so that in me you will have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. This verse, it cuts through politics and opinions. In a world that is presenting us with trouble, let's take heart. Jesus has overcome the world. Thanks for listening. God bless you.